Okay, so that's where we left off. And um, so there are three big boxes that we have created for our convenience, in which we categorize and we basically place all living organisms on Earth. These three big boxes are called domains. So this is the three-domain system. You must know this for me very well. You must know the name of these domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So the main factor, the factor that distinguishes these three domains is the type of cell of which the organisms are made. So bacteria and archaea have a very simple type of cell, as we will see pretty soon here, prokaryotic cell, while eukarya have the eukaryotic cell type. We are eukarya, so our cells are bigger, more complex, and have a nucleus. Karyon, karyon, from Greek, means nucleus, and the prefix EU means true. Okay, so true nucleus, simple as that. While prokaryote means prokaryon, before the nucleus. Okay, so prokaryotic cells don't have a nucleus; they appear before a nucleus developed. Eukaryotic cells are organisms whose cells have a true nucleus. Okay. I was trying to tell you last time that this diagram here is known as a phylogenetic tree. This is the the simplest of all, so the most generic, because it represents all the domains, right? The biggest boxes. And it's telling us one thing. There was one organism on Earth that appeared from which everything started, right? This organism evolved, changed, to where then developed into two different lineages, okay? And then evolution went on again, and one of these lineages, one of these branches again evolved, diversified in two, in archaea and eukarya. And I was trying to tell you that this diagram has not always been represented this way. Scientists make mistakes. They make sometimes assumptions that, or base their conclusions on some observations that then evolve with time. Sometimes we develop new tools and change our understanding of life, of nature. So till a few years ago, the branch of archaea was coming off bacteria this way, okay? We have changed that after this new tool, the tool of molecular analysis, DNA analysis, came available. So if you look at the cells of bacteria and archaea, they're very similar. They are that kind of simpler cell with no nucleus, no organelles. And so when we were basing our phylogenetic trees, our understanding of history of evolution on morphology, on anatomy, just looking at how does this look like? Is this similar? Okay, maybe they have a common ancestor. They come from the same lineage that split. So by doing that, we were saying, okay, archaea and bacteria are very related. They're very similar to one another. They look alike. Therefore, this is the phylogenetic tree, the derivation. But surprisingly enough, when the molecular tool came available and we did some molecular analysis, we figured out that actually archaea and eukarya are much more related than archaea and bacteria at the molecular level. So we have changed the diagram. The diagram that nobody thought we would ever change, we changed it, the first phylogenetic tree. So this tells you the phylogenetic trees sometimes are revisited. they've been revisited a lot after the molecular tool came available. And in many cases, actually, it was really impressive how the molecular tree just overlapped the tree that was based on morphology, anatomy. In some cases, we have changed things after learning more about molecular similarities. Okay, so again, this three-domain system to be known very well. Okay. Now, because in the so for bacteria and archaea, you're good. You don't have to remember anything more than that, because in these two domains there is no subdivision, because it's pretty straightforward. You don't have bacteria. There are many species out there, thousands and thousands of species, but they all look pretty much alike, and they're unicellular, pretty straightforward. So we don't subdivide that domain in smaller compartments. But when it comes to eukarya, eukarya comprises very different types of organisms, such as plants, animals. All these organisms have that kind of cell, eukaryotic cell. So we can just throw in one compartment all these different organisms without subdividing again. So here is a schematic representation. I'm sure you have heard in school about kingdoms. Eukarya, the domain eukarya, we subdivided it in 4 subcompartments known as kingdoms. And here is just drawings, you know, to kind of make you visualize who we're talking about. There is the kingdom Animalia, if you want to say it in Latin, animals, if you want to say it in English. And then plants. I'm sure these two are more familiar to you. But then there are other two, fungi or fungi. You will hear all kind of pronunciations. And protists. Maybe these two you don't remember them very well. Why do we need to differentiate fungi? Fungi, as we will see, they are kind of like, they have characteristics of animals, really, mostly, but they don't move. So they do have some other characteristics of plants. So there's some kind of in between. They have a special type of metabolism. So they really need to be on a special compartment by themselves. You cannot put them with plants or animals, otherwise you get confused. The other kingdom that we're going to look at is the kingdom Eukarya. I will see if I can borrow a microscope one day, and we may be able to look at some of these. These are microscopic organisms, but they have the same cell type of which we are composed. Examples of these are amoebas. We'll talk about amoeba. I'm going to scare you forever. You're not going to get into a lake ever again around here. So these are organisms that you will find, for instance, very easily in lake water around here. Okay? We'll talk about them more in detail. Okay, so differences between prokaryote and eukaryote cell, you must know very well for me. The main differentiator is the karyon. Just remember, it comes from the word itself, the name itself. Karyon is nucleus. So prokaryotes, before the nucleus, they don't have a nucleus. Eukaryotes, eukaryon, have a true nucleus. That's the main differentiator. But there are also other differences. For instance, the size. The size of bacteria is at very least 10 times less than a eukaryotic cell. And when we talk about cell size, I'll show you a diagram, we talk about something that is a millionth smaller than me. I'm about 1.5 meters tall, or short, whatever you want to say. And so a cell is a millionth time smaller than me. Just to give you an idea here. And of course, you cannot see a cell at naked eye. You need a microscope, you need a magnification, okay? At least 400 times magnification, let's say, something like that. And so other differences are presence of organelles. Eukaryotic cells, remember, they're bigger and they have many more subcompartments in them, okay? Some subcompartments you have learned in school about mitochondria. Last time when I presented to you, most of you remember them. Mitochondria are organelles, or subcompartments in a cell. Imagine a cell as a factory, a self-sufficient factory, big production factory. A factory, a self-sufficient factory must have facilities in it, right? The facility that provides energy, the facilities that is command center where all the managers are, and that's how the cell works. So you have these facilities, these subcompartments in a eukaryotic cell that have dedicated functions, okay, to make the whole factory work and produce. So eukaryotic cells have these big subcompartments, while prokaryotic cells don't. And if you will, the nucleus itself is one compartment, a big compartment. Now, prokaryotic cells, of course, have genetic material, just like eukaryotic cells. We know even viruses have genetic material. That's the message, important message. It says what the organism has to be, what it has to look like, how it functions. So you cannot miss that, that molecule. Eukaryotic cells like to have it organized in this compartment. It's so big and complex, so many managers there to talk to one another, while prokaryotic cells don't have a specific compartment. They have it like in the cell, in the middle of the cell without compartmentalizing it. This is a scale just to kind of give you an idea, okay, of the size here of a cell. We're talking about 10 to the minus 6, which is scientific notation, right, representation. 1 millionth, okay, 1 over a million, or 10 to the minus 6 is the same number, right? It's just representing it in a different way. See, like E. coli. Have you ever heard about E. coli? Is it our friend or our enemy? Enemy, are you sure? It depends on the strain, but you have E. coli in your intestine, and they're fundamental for you, for your body to function, okay? They live with us. We'll talk about this when we talk about intimate relationships. We are in an intimate relationship with E. coli, which is beneficial to us. Of course, there has to be a balance. There are several things can happen to you when you say, like, I have an E. coli infection, you know, like a misconception. It could be that a different strain of E. coli has infected you and is not the normal strain that is beneficial to your body. Or it could be that there is an overgrowth of it, okay, and it gives you discomfort. But normally, E. coli is fundamental. It's one of the organisms that live in symbiosis with us. Not only E. coli, so many more. We'll talk about this at the very end. And actually, what you're going to learn in this class is that you actually are a bacterium. You're not really a human being, because there are many more bacterial cells in your body than human cells. They exceed way the number of your cells. So, sorry, you're a bacterium. You're going to learn so many things in this class, so many new things. I'm going to break some news for you that you may or may not like, but that is the truth. Okay, so again, the scale. A person is a meter and a half. I'm a meter and a half. This is a little bit taller guy. An E. coli, a bacterium, common bacterium, is a couple of micrometers long. Red blood cell, 10 micrometers, and then there are, so in our body there are so many types of cells, right? The biggest cell in a human body, not everybody has it, is the egg cell. The egg cell will be like about 100 micrometer big, huge cell. It's a huge cell. One of actually the smallest cell is a red blood cell. Something in between could be a nerve cell. Nerve cells are also quite big, about 40, 50 micrometers. Micrometers are indicated with this symbol. This is the Greek mu, has kind of like a long leg to it, micrometers. Okay, anyways, I'm not going to ask you about these measurements, okay? It's just to give you an idea All right, so domain bacteria. Let's just touch on the couple of domains before the two domains other than eukarya, and I'm going to zoom into eukarya. And in this course, really, we are going to focus on animals, evolution of animals. Ultimately, we want to know where we come from, right? So that's the point of this course. At the very end, we're going to talk about hominidae evolution. But we need to know the story before. And here's another news, and I'm going to break you. You sign up for biology class, and you end up in a history class. I don't know if you like history, but we're going to go through a lot of history. It's not like hundreds of times or not even thousands of times. It's billions of time of history we're going to look at, okay? So what happened on Earth and how evolution happened. So that is just a time scale. That is a little bit different than what you're used to, but it's a history class, really. So domain bacteria is the most ancient lineage. It appeared, we estimate, around 4 billions, not millions, billions years ago. And there are single-cell organisms, or we can say unicellular, single-cell or unicellular organisms. The fact that they can grow in association many times, and they can form like a rope-like structure or a grape-like structure, doesn't mean that they're multicellular. They just associate, okay, form clumps, but they're unicellular. They have an independent life as a single cell on their own. They have no nucleus, they have no organelles, no compartmentalization like eukaryotic cells. Remember that factory that is a huge factory in its compartments. These ones they don't have, okay? They're simple, they're simpler, smaller, and they're very interesting in terms of metabolism. They have it all. There are some bacteria, actually some super important bacteria, we're going to talk about them a lot pretty soon here. We start talking about them, and they probably come up every class. They do photosynthesis, so they're producers. So there's a species of bacteria, they're called cyanobacteria. You will learn this name. You'll have to learn it for me when time comes. They're green, and they do photosynthesis just like plants, okay? Slightly different process of photosynthesis, but they're actually the first organism on Earth. They've invented photosynthesis. And actually what you're going to learn is that in reality, these bacteria are the only organism on Earth that does photosynthesis. It's not true that plants do photosynthesis. They have hijacked the bacteria to make photosynthesis. And we will learn about this. So bacteria can do photosynthesis. Some of them, others are consumers, just like us. They are same metabolism as us. Many of them are decomposers. I told you already this, right? When we talked about energy flow, the importance of decomposers, I told you decomposers are mostly bacteria and fungi. Some, unfortunately, are pathogenic. Anybody recalls this? Can tell me? This is the Latin name. Well, today we'll talk about nomenclature, how we indicate name of species. This is a species, Bacillus anthracis. Does it recall some name in your mind? Anthrax, what we call anthrax, okay? It's Bacillus anthracis. You know, this is a pathogen. It's very scary, right? We'll talk about this one in particular and why it's so scary. This bacterium is amazing. It can live hundreds and hundreds of years in very harsh conditions. It can kind of freeze itself and come back to life when the right conditions come. So bacteria are amazing. They have all kind of metabolism. They can do all kind of things that actually we cannot do. Who would like to freeze themselves and come back to life after 100 years? Be cool. But you have no friends. You don't know anybody. okay? Yeah, I don't know if I would like that. All right, so bacteria and their main features. Second domain, archaea. Archaea look a lot like bacteria. They have the prokaryotic cell type. They tend to be smaller, though. But the one very distinctive characteristic of archaea is their type of metabolism. They're called extremophiles. Feel, love, extreme, love for extreme conditions, extreme temperature, extreme salinity, extreme pH, conditions where not any other living organism can afford to live in. They can. For instance, they're found in volcanic, deep volcanic vents. Scientists didn't think there could be life in that kind of harsh and hot condition. Sure enough, we found life, archaea, okay? For our luck, there is no pathogen in this domain. Imagine if there were pathogens. You know that if sometimes we're giving notice to boil water because there has been some kind of contamination maybe of the pipes, the water pipes with other things, hopefully not sewer water, but whatever. They tell us to boil water. What are we doing when we boil water? We're killing the bacteria. Bacteria are susceptible to high temperature. They die when you boil water. They all die at extreme pH. If the pH is too low or too high, you can use bleach. You know, bleach, it's very basic. Okay, it's a very high pH, and it's going to kill bacteria. So extreme pH, extreme temperature, or salinity as well, it will kill bacteria, but it will not kill archaea. But for our luck, as I said, there are no pathogens here. Otherwise, imagine we couldn't get rid of them. Okay? Good thing. All right, so archaea are extremophiles, and they live at in extreme conditions. Okay? Domain eukarya. As I told you, in this domain, we have to do a subclassification, okay? And the first subclassification is going to be in 4 boxes, known as kingdoms. There's 4 kingdoms, of course, you must know very well for me. Plants, animals, fungi, and protists, okay? And they're so diverse. All these groups, they are very different. Plants and animals are very different from one another, different characteristics. Fungi also have different characteristics and as well as protists. Let's start with protists. Okay, here is one confusing thing. And unfortunately, as I told you, scientists not always agree on things. I'm trying to follow what most authors in books will present to you. Theoretically, in the kingdom protists, there should be only unicellular, very simple organisms. But many times, authors like to put also the algae. These algae here, which are the, let's say these are the precursor of plants. And so I'm putting them here, but in reality, protists are pretty much unicellular organisms, such as amoebas. I hope we can do some microscope activity. I swear I'm going to do it this semester because it's so helpful to you. Things like this guy over here is called Paramecium. If you harvest some lake water around here, you'll find that guy. He's harmless. He lives just a life on its own. It has a type of metabolism very similar to us. It's a one-cell organism that moves. It has some cilia, some projections all over. It's so fun to look at. It seems like those rotate. While it moves, you'll see that those You cannot see them very well here, but they're all over the place. Rotate. So organisms like that, free living, okay? But unfortunately, the kingdom Proteus also has many pathogens in it, and actually, we will talk about some of them. Okay, I want you to have an idea who these guys are. Again, it's mostly single cell life forms, although some others like to put algae in them. In terms of energy utilization, in this kingdom, you can find some that are green. What kind of hint it gives you? If I find a green organism, makes photosynthesis, okay? So you find some protists that just make photosynthesis, and protists that have, so they're autotroph, and protists that are heterotroph as well, okay? And so both types of metabolism plants and animals. Okay, and here comes fungi, okay, or fungi. Most of fungi are multicellular, but there are some that are unicellular. Who makes bread at home? You're using a fungus, okay? And it's a unicellular. If you were to look at the microscope, what's going on there when you dissolve, what do you buy the packets that are dry? The dry packets. What I do, I buy the dry packets, and then when I was in Italy, I would buy the fresh yeast, but I cannot find it here. So I put them in water with a little bit of like a mini spoon of sugar. Have you ever done that? Your bread is gonna come much better. You just mix the dry stuff with the flour. Do this. Get a packet, put it in a bowl of warm water. Okay, not too hot, warm. Apple juice, yeah, because it has sugar. Maybe the pH is helping there too. So you put a little bit of sugar. What happens is that your yeast is going to come back to life in like a matter of 10 minutes, and you see it bubbling, and it's dividing. Okay, it's starting to divide and make fermentation. You smell it, right, and you see the bubbles, and with that water you make your bread. The best bread ever. I know. I make my own pizza at least once a week. I try to. So if you were to look at that mixture that you have done with the water of your yeast, you'll see single cells, all single cells, okay? Maybe if we do microscope, we can do that. I can get a packet of yeast, we can look at it. So there are single cell, okay, fungi. But most of fungi are the so-called mushrooms, right, that we also eat many times. And so multicellular organs. Now, the one very distinctive characteristic of fungi is that they have a type of metabolism of digestion different from animals and plants. It's called extracellular digestion. So what they do, basically, they produce enzymes, they release them especially on the dead matter, and they break it down, and they absorb the simple components of that complex organic matter that they have digested. Okay, so that's what they do. They tend to inhabit dark, moist places. Okay, and you see that they come up real quickly, right? After rain in your yard, after or a dead piece of trunk, a tree trunk, or places like that, right? All right, so plants, again, this is not a kingdom we're going to talk about in detail. So this is pretty much the only slide that I have about plants. They are multicellular, okay? Because if you find an organism that does photosynthesis and is unicellular, who is going to be? Single cell, green, that does photosynthesis, eukaryotic cells with a nucleus. Who is going to be? Is it going to be a plant? Is it going to be an animal? A fungus or a protist? A protist, right? Unicellular eukaryote is going to be a protist. Okay, so plants are multicellular and they are autotroph. They're the producers, right? The main producers on Earth. So they make up the food base for biological community, especially on land, but they also live in water. So they have occupied all the habitats. They can, there are plants that live in water, plants that live on Earth, and in all kind of environments, even very arid, very dry environments. Okay, and they have evolved the strategies to live in those kind of environments. All right, so that's all. And you already kind of know these, right? Plants make photosynthesis, so they're the producers. All right, animals. This is where we are going to land for quite some time in this course. What are the characteristics of animals? All animals are multicellular, period. And we are consumers, meaning we cannot do photosynthesis, right? We're all consumers. We belong here. And but depending on what we feed on, we can, and also our mode of how we live our life, let's say, as animals, we can be herbivores. So who are the herbivores? The animals that feed directly on plants, not on other animals. Then there are the carnivores that feed on other animals. There are also the omnivores, right, that they can feed on both, like us. There are some animals that are parasites. They live off, they don't really eat another animal, but they kind of like live in symbiosis, we say, or symbiosis with another animal, and they kind of like take advantage of the other organs without really killing it, maybe creating a lot of discomfort. And then there are the scavengers that actually like to eat animals that are already dead. Now, the other important thing to understand about animals, to remember, is that animals move about at least some stage of their life cycle. We'll see examples of the first group of animals we're going to study. Okay, they don't move. How can they be classified as animals? I'll tell you why. Okay, so at least at one stage of their life, animals will move. All right, so this was just a very brief introduction of the kingdoms. Okay, of course, we're going to zoom into the animal kingdom, but we're also going to talk more about the protists because it's such an amazing, interesting kingdom. Now, before going into that, we're going to go over taxonomy and scientific nomenclature. And also we're going to look at phylogenetic trees, understand how to interpret them. It's pretty simple. Okay, so the modern scientific nomenclature, the way we name species basically, has been introduced by Carolus Linnaeus, and this guy actually has simplified our life a lot because you can Google it, you can research what was the name of a tomato before him. I mean, he had 7 epithets to it, Latin or complex. So imagine scientists that had to deal with all these, and they were sick of it, like it's too complicated. So Carolus Linnaeus came up with a binomial nomenclature system, and after that we have adopted it. So binomial, two name nomenclature. So a species is named with 2 words, basically. Okay, and for instance, let's give some examples. And when we when in lay terminology, when we say a coyote, that's not the name of the species. It's a common name. We'll give it in lay terminology. If you want to be scientific, if scientists are talking to one another or are publishing, they never say coyote. They say Canis latrans. That's the scientific name. They identify the very species. A gray wolf, Canis lupus. Domesticated dog, Canis familiaris. Familia, family, domesticated. You have your dog as part of your family, right? So you see these three different species. They all have the first epithet the same, Canis. One is latrans, another is lupus, another is familiaris. So it already tells you something. So it tells you that they have something in common. They have some things in common, probably, not just that first epithet. So the first epithet in the name of a species represents the genus. Okay, and in a minute here we will look at the scientific, the hierarchy of taxonomy. The second epithet identifies the species. Okay. So this binomial nomenclature you must know for me. Okay. And typically when we're writing, when typing in a scientific article or whatever, and we have to type in name of a species, we put it in italics as the convention. Okay, you'll see now that I've told you, if you're reading something on a book, you'll notice. The binomial nomenclature introduced by Carlos Linnaeus of how we name species. Binomial nomenclature, and what is the first word in what is the first word is the genus. What's the second word? The species. Identifies the species. That's it. We just talked about Canis latrans, Canis lupus, and Canis familiaris. To me, these three look so alike. Why do we separate them in three species? If you think about it, there are breeds of dogs that look so different from one another, right? That almost like you wouldn't tell it's the same species. These three that we're saying are three different species, they look so much more alike with one another than some breeds of dogs, right? So what makes us classify these three guys here as three different species? Good. So we'll talk about this pretty soon, but just keep this in mind. These three are three different species for a very specific reason, not because I think these one they look different enough. Okay, it won't be like very scientific, right? To base on an opinion. They're different enough. There's a very specific way we go by to define species, and we will talk about this pretty soon. Okay, I don't want to go too much into other stuff. We're talking about hierarchy of taxonomy, taxonomic classification here. Okay, we have to continue on that. And here is going to be your best friend for today. You have to learn this for me. But I have a system, maybe for you to remember. And actually, this sentence was told me by one of you guys, one student in one of these classes. They learned it in school. So remember, we went already through the domain. Now, between domain and species, there is a lot going on, right? We already learned about domain and kingdom. Now, when you zoom into the kingdom Animalia, animals or plants, you can imagine there are so many different types of plants out there. Some have adapted to the desert, some are living in water. Again, you cannot just say this is a plant. You kind of have to start making a distinction between several other groups, and so on and so forth. So these are all boxes and sub-boxes of taxonomic classification, okay? Going from the highest to the lowest. After species, there is nothing else. We are the same species. We all have the same unique characteristics of Homo sapiens, period. There is no other distinction after that that we make scientifically. So from domain, you go to kingdom, then there is a phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Okay, imagine these are boxes into boxes. And dear King Philip came over for good soup, can help you remember, right? The hierarchy. This is just a memory. And I have another sentence, and please don't share with anybody. This is my own copyright, okay, that I have created. David knows princesses can outgrow feeling golden stars. Makes sense, right? Again, don't share, please. This is my copyright. So whichever is easier for you to remember, okay? So the principle is that from domain to species, we go from broadly related characteristics to specific related characteristics, okay? So this is the hierarchy of taxonomic classification that you must remember for me. Let's give some examples of all this, okay? To just have a better idea. Lion, common name. Scientific name, Panthera leo. That's the scientific name of a lion. What's the domain of a lion? Easy. Eukarya. The kingdom, Animalia. Now, after that, you're going to start being in trouble. Of course, you don't, obviously, you don't know. And I'm not going to ask you to remember this for me. It's just an example. So you have to remember that a Eukarya and Mala, that is by your knowledge of what the kingdoms are and what the domains are, which I'm asking you to remember. Now, the phylum is Chordata. Corda. Who knows Spanish in this class? What's a corda? A rope? A rope? No? Cuerda. Sorry. Okay. We say corda in Italian. Okay, cuerda. And of course, you know, Spanish comes from Latin. So cordata is a Latin word. Means rope. Cordata means having a rope. What is that rope? We have it. It's a structure, it's a rope-like structure, not that forms as we are embryos in a mother's womb. And eventually, in us and in many other chordates or chordata, becomes a spine. It's a tie. Yeah, it's a structure, long structure, okay? Or corda in Italian means rope. That's what I'm saying. Maybe it means rope also in Spanish. How do you say rope in Spanish? So also means rope. So it's a rope-like structure that evolves, develops in all animals, or some animals, no, don't have, sorry, that have it, especially vertebrates, okay? So we are chordata as well. We are in the same box because we developed that. We develop a spine eventually. And zooming in more, the next box for this will be mammalia, mammals. We also belong there as well, okay? Because we have some characteristics that distinguish us from other animals. They make us mammals. And we'll talk about those in detail because, again, we're going to go in a certain detail. Order carnivora. These are strictly carnivores, okay? They only eat meat, okay? Family Felidae, and there are characteristics of Felidae. For instance, they tend to be more nocturnal, and they have anatomical characteristics that have been distinguished. Genus Panthera, species Leo, okay? So up to this point, basically, we're pretty much the same. Our classification will be the same. Okay? For instance, giving you an example, I was telling you the defining characteristics of the family Felidae. These are just some of them. There are many more to it. They're obligate carnivores, need to eat meat to survive. They're actually called hypercarnivores. They're mostly solitary. They like a solitary life. Typically, but not always, occupy forested habitats. They're mainly nocturnal, okay? These are all species in the genus Panthera, okay? Who you see there, you see a lion, that is Panthera leo in the middle, but you see a puma as well. And you see also a leopard, you see a tiger, a jaguar, a leopard, okay, gepard. So all these are the same genus. Remember, genus is the first word that identifies the species. So it tells you they're very close. They're very close, but yet, and they also look very alike. It's just a different pattern, okay? Different pattern, but why on the surface? But why they're so similar? Why do we classify them as different species? Again, question, and we will understand why pretty soon here. Okay, I want to leave the question open for now. Okay, I already told you the convention. When we're typing, we put the species name in italics, and if we are writing by hand, we put a line under because we're already handwriting, right? We can't really. How do we distinguish that? That's the convention. Okay. Another example of taxonomic classification of a dog, Canis familiaris. Okay. Again, up to this point, there is nothing different from the Panthera leo, the lion. But then when it comes to family, it's Canidae, okay? It's not Felidae, it's Canidae. They're different, they have different characteristics. Dogs are diurnal, not much nocturnal, okay? And they have so many different characteristics than Felidae. Okay, so again, to give you an idea of how taxonomic classification works. Okay. Do you guys need a little break? Okay. That's a few minutes. All right.